Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's Global Pandemic Show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this conversation around various aspects of the pandemic. Today, we have a very special episode for you, 293, Afghanistan, the US, and what's next. You're going to meet some experts who will help us understand what's happening there, and folks who have lived there, worked there, covered journalism, and covered the fast-moving story that we still need to pay attention to. 20 Afghans who work for the New York Times are now in the US as refugees, along with their family members, about 100 folks in all. You'll meet one of them and learn how you can help. We have three fantastic guests with us. Fahim Abed is with us. He's a former New York Times local reporter in Kabul, now with his family in Texas, and he's at Fahim Abed. Donatella Lorch is with us. She's at Tangled Journeys, former war and foreign correspondent for the New York Times, NBC News, Newsweek. And we'll be joined a little later by Matt Wald, a former New York Timeser who has set up a GoFundMe for former New York Times Afghan staff and their families. We'll give you that address so that you can donate to that GoFundMe and mainly ask questions, share the show, tell your friends so they can watch live or later. Hi, everybody. I'm Sree in New York. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at the Stony Brook School of Communication and Journalism, and I'm the co-founder of Digimentors, a social media, digital media, and virtual events consulting company. Thank you so much for being here. Please tag your friends. They can watch live or later. This will play immediately on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. We are asking you to do that so that if there's somebody in the world who should be watching this episode, they don't miss the opportunity to talk and learn from our fabulous guests. Let's tell you a little bit about the company that's bringing you this. This is Digimentors.group. Check us out. If you have a conference, a summit, a webinar, a talk show that you would like help with, please talk to us, and we'd love to help you put that show on the air. We'll give you a little bit of background on the show itself. We've had, in our first 285 episodes, more than 1.5 million viewers, 545 guests, including 311 women. Yes, we counted, from 75 cities and 22 countries, including the chief scientist of the WHO. We are able to bring this to you because of our partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in. And you can find our archives at youtube.com/Sreenet. Please hit subscribe. And we're only able to do this because of our awesome producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and at Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon on Twitter. They've been with me since day one, and we've built something very special because of them. And an extra shout out today to Carla Baranakis, who is with us helping produce this particular episode of our show. And we are super grateful to her, a former New York Times journalist and editor there. We are excited to tell you about some of the other shows that we do as well, including a recent episode of the New York Times Read Along. This past Sunday, we had Linda Greenhouse, another former New York Times person. She, of course, covered the Supreme Court for 30 years. And she was on our New York Times Read Along. Every Sunday, we read the New York Times out loud. We've been doing it for 6 years, and we have great guests every Sunday. So please join us, and you can check out the recording on my YouTube channel, so you don't want to miss that. And we want to remind you to please hit share right now. Tag somebody who would be interested in this topic, or hit share or Twitter, retweet. We'd love to get more of your friends watching with us. Before we start, we want to thank our sponsor of this particular episode. It's the movie Indian Sweets and Spices, which comes to you in American theaters on November 19th. And it stars, among other people, Manisha Koirala, the big Bollywood star who has been a guest twice on this show, talking about how the pandemic affected Bollywood, how it's affected Mumbai, how it's affected her native Nepal. And we have at least one guest who knows Nepal very well, who is, of course, joining us. So before we bring on our guests, we have a little snippet about the making of the movie, and then we'll get to our guests.
This movie is about what it's like to be an Indian immigrant in America and to live in that world.
I grew up being dragged to hundreds of Indian dinner parties growing up. For all these immigrants, it's a place in America to gather, to wear their own clothes, to eat their own food.
I play Alia. A lot of the movie is her figuring out who she is.
And then when she goes home after going to college, she discovers all these secrets that her parents have been keeping from her. While she's coming of age, it's almost her mother's coming of age as well.
You see her as a socialite, later on reveal that she's not all that.
Manisha Koirala is a legendary Bollywood actress.
You kept it a secret?
Back then, my life was complicated.
Indian aunties are a very important cultural phenomenon.
They love to gossip. That's their hobby.
Teasing. Artists would take away a lot of warmth, a lot of love through entertainment.
So that's Indian Sweets and Spices, which debuts in American theaters on November 19th. Please tell your friends so that they can watch. Now we're ready for our show, and that's the topic you see on the screen, Afghanistan, the US, and what's next. We're going to be talking about the 20 Afghans who worked for the New York Times that are now in the US as refugees, and their families are here as well. More than 100 people, and Matt Wald, who started a GoFundMe, will be with us in a few minutes. But before that, we're going to meet Fahim Abed and Donatella Lorch, and we're going to get to talk about the story of these refugees who are former journalists and other staffers for the New York Times. So please join me in welcoming Fahim and Donatella. Hi, folks. Thank you for being here. I am so grateful to both of you for joining me on Tuesday night. We have so much to talk about. I'll first start by just asking Fahim to set up this for us a little bit. Tell us the circumstances of his own travel here and how he got here. And then we'll talk to Donatella. So Fahim, over to you.
Thank you. We left Afghanistan on 19th of August, 3-4 days after the collapse of the government and the country to the Taliban. We were first supposed to leave the airport the day that leave the country the day that Taliban entered to the city, but there was a different situation in the airport, and everyone rushed toward the airport. So we experienced leaving for a couple more days under the Taliban, and then we were able to make it to Doha, and then to Mexico, and eventually to Houston, Texas.
Well, I'm glad you were able to make that journey. Can you tell us a little bit of how many people came with you and how everybody's been doing so far?
It is 127 people, all New York Times employees, including journalists and other supporting staff. And like everyone is trying to resettle, it's not an easy process. I experienced being refugee in a very young age when during the Civil War, I was forced to leave to Pakistan, and we spent only a week there. And then my father said, like, we will go back to Afghanistan and experience whatever it is there, because it was so tough. So now, as I am also a father, I can understand my father much better. It's very easy. Like back in Afghanistan or in other Asian countries, it's a dream to go to the US and resettle there. But it's much harder than what people think and than what we thought. You start from scratch, and it's the culture, the society, everything is very different. But we are learning, and we are resettling, so it is fine.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us, and we'll talk more about your life here, how you're adjusting, and we also want to understand a little bit more about what happened in Afghanistan and why we should still pay attention as America moves on beyond the war and the events of the last 20 years. And someone who's documented those 20 years in so many important ways is Donatella Lorch, and she's with us. Donatella, we're going to come to you. Would love to hear your thoughts first on just what Fahim has said, and then your reflections, please.
Well, I think first about what Fahim has an incredible tale to to tell the world about the fear of leaving, how they all left. The New York Times managed to get their entire office, that was massive, it was quite large, and the families. So the staff and the families out. How do you do that when you are when you have very little time? Basically, they found out, and within hours they got to the airport, and that meant getting all the families, moving the families there into the chaos. And I think that this is a really great way for Fahim to also get it. He has an amazing description of when they were all encircled by Taliban, and there were some people that some of the staff had broken arms. They were pushing and shoving and trying to get from one part of the airport to the other part of the airport. They spent two days at the airport, I think right now where we're looking at Afghanistan is that no one, the West doesn't know, and the United States doesn't seem to know what to do with this country. The Taliban banks have closed down. There's no money. There's going to be massive famine. There isn't jobs for people. There is, increasing discrimination against women in general. So there's a big question mark as to what is going to happen in Afghanistan. And the notion that we can just forget it is so dead wrong, because it is at the heart of so much in terms of world peace and refugees. And also the study of global warming is all up in the Himalaya, going faster there than anywhere else in the world. So when it's very important to sort of understand the chaos of the departure from Afghanistan for so many people, because they were deracinated. You lose everything. You lose everything from your clothes to your extended family to your way of life, and you have to start from scratch. And I've worked for decades with refugees resettled in the United States, and also refugees that were stuck in their various countries in Africa and in Europe. And you have to develop a whole new you. And it's not something that happens overnight. You have to learn a new language. You have to learn a new way of life. You have to learn a new way of eating, which is important, by the way, because food is our comfort for so many of us. And it also means that the ones that really adapt fastest are the young children. They just move straight in, go to school, learn the language first. The ones that are hardest hit will be the older ones, the ones in 50 on up. Oh my God, my age. Because it's harder to adapt to a different way of life and to learn a language. Fahim has a very young son who's 1 year old, and English is going to be very much, I think, his main language soon. And Fahim is still very young, but if you look at the older generation, they will spend a lot of time trying to live their life the way it was in Afghanistan.
And that brings its own problems if you're not in a big Afghan community, for example. I just want to, before we bring Fahim back into the conversation, just to get Donatella's assessment of the New York Times itself as a company, how it's managed this whole thing. What are your thoughts on that? I know you used to work for the Times, no longer, so tell us.
I think the Times was incredible. I think they really went all out. And they could have, many news organizations have done this, we'll take our journalists out, but that's it. Not the families, not this, that, and the other. They not only got them all out and but they managed to, it was not a simple extraction. It took 2+ days to get it worked out through connection. And they got them to the Middle East, and then to Mexico, and then to Houston. but they weren't able to come under the umbrella of being refugees. When you come under the official government umbrella of being a refugee, you have the right to be helped by agencies that are government subsidized for up to 2-3 months, and you get not a lot of assistance, but sufficient assistance to start a new life. So the New York Times, I mean, they're not a social services organization, so they're trying their best. But I think one of the reasons that one of the incredible part also of the New York Times is its staff and its former staff, because they have come out full force in terms of donating money to help their colleagues that came from Afghanistan.
And so we must give them credit for making that effort. I think there's so much that we need to talk about, and we'll be joined in a few minutes by Matt Wald, former New York Times reporter who has put together a GoFundMe. You see the address on the screen, or if you just search Afghan journalists in Houston. I think this is a great way for all of us to support and pitch in and help. Fahim, let's go back to you. Can you describe for us where you're living without telling us the exact location, but what kind of community is it? Are there a lot of immigrants there? Are there other Afghans? Are you all together? Just give us, if you can paint that picture for us a little bit.
We are living in somewhere which is very close to downtown in Houston, and it is a mixed community. Like we don't see a lot of immigrants here, but in the apartments where I live, there is 10 families of New York Times employees. So like we have got our own small community, and the families who have got kids, they started going to school now, and the woman and men who can't speak English, they have started taking English classes. Some of us start like reading guidelines for learning how to drive, and so we can eventually have a work driving lessons. That's how like we are going ahead here, and we attend a couple appointments every week, which is related to our refugee cases or to our other documentation issues. The New York Times, in evacuating us, they did a great job, as Donatella also said. Like many news organizations said, like they can't do anything, or they said we will like help only our journalists. But the New York Times, like not the current employees only, they took all the former employees as well, and it was not just
drivers, interpreters, right? Translators.
Cooks, house staff, everyone. No one was left behind.
But who was keeping this list that they would track all this? Like, how did they track them down? I'm just curious how that was possible. Was there one particular person who?
The process started a couple of weeks before the collapse of the government, and all those who worked with the New York Times, they were worried, so they would contact us, or we would go and contact them and say, like, we are trying for evacuation, or like, actually we were supposed to leave through commercial means, but then like there was a chaos in the airport, and I reached to the aircraft which we were supposed to take to which was supposed to take us to Ukraine, but then because of the chaos in the airport, they had to leave, and we couldn't make it. So then we spent the night in the airport, and we were for like more than 24 hours, we didn't have any access to drinking water or food or anything. And later on, we tried to get to the military side. We were attacked 2 times by the Taliban with rifles and with plastic pipes, and with the same brutality that they were beating kids and women and everyone. And to defend the kid and woman from this mess in the airport and from the Taliban, we formed a circle. All main members of the family had formed a circle around this group, and we would like just try to defend as much as we could. So, but despite all our efforts, we were not able to make it to the military side of the airport where evacuation was underway. Then we went back home, spent 2 nights. None of us, like most of us, didn't go back to their own houses because they were afraid of the Taliban. I went to my in-laws, and everyone went somewhere else. And then after 2 nights, we were able to make it back to the airport with the help of Qataris. We went to their embassy, and after that, we were able to come to the military airport. And one of our colleagues from the New York Times, who was a farmer, who is a veteran, so he was in Qatar. He was able to be evacuated, but he came all the way back to Afghanistan. TM Thomas, and he was in the military airport, and he came to welcome us to the military side, and then he brought a lot of Marines with him. Actually, he was one of the key people who made this all process possible. And then our another colleague, Christina, she was handling all the logistics. So like there was a very big effort from the New York Times. Like our chief editors and head of international desk I was the contact person in the airport at the first day. They would call me. I receive a call from Pentagon, and they said that we are aware of your presence in the airport and we are trying our best to get you out. So like we didn't feel for a moment. It was very emotional and very tough time, but for a moment we didn't feel that we were abandoned or we were left behind. Like there was full support from the New York Times from the very beginning until now. And now like we are part of a program where like we have got visas for a specific time, and then like we will need to do the further processing. And New York Times is still helping with that. They have hired lawyers. They send their own lawyers here. So like they're still here with the full support and like with any problem they're helping us.
It's so great to hear, and I'm glad your families are managing in what is obviously very tough circumstances. Donatello explained very clearly what are the issues facing everybody. We just want to go to some of the comments that are coming in, and folks, tell us where you're watching from. If you have a question for Fahim, we'd love to hear you. We'll love to ask him about it. And Jonathan Borstein is watching from the East Village. He's watched 293 episodes of this show, which even I've not done because there've been guest hosts instead of me, and he's watched every single one. Thank you. And Stefan Kaplan's watching from Ramsey, New Jersey, and Rahajan is watching from Long Island, and Rose Horowitz is one of our producers, and she's watching. And Stefan says, would never miss Donnie on any show, and especially yours, Sree. You know who brought us together years ago, and that's right, it was Donatella. And Ravina says, welcome to all of you, and especially, of course, to Fahim. And Pradnya is watching from Silver Spring, Maryland. And Neil Parekh, who is one of our colleagues at Digimentors, says, such an important conversation. Thank you. And please, folks, if you have a question, jump in. Jan Myers is asking, do you believe enough of a taste for democracy was experienced in Afghanistan that the country will advance towards a more democratic life? That's a question coming to us from the Midwest, from Jan. Let's ask Fahim, and then we'll ask Donatella, and then we'll bring Matt Wald into this conversation. I think this is a more optimistic question because we're so worried about what's happening with the Taliban right now. But Fahim, your thoughts, please.
Well, democracy was a very great experience for Afghanistan, and there is a generation that has grew up in this 20 years of democracy in the country, and they're very well educated. They are committed to their country, and they are making a difference now. They can make a difference because you see that still under the Taliban control, they're able to raise their voice. They stand against the Taliban decisions, and they do whatever they can. But unfortunately, Afghanistan is on the verge of a humanitarian crisis, and the situation is very much worrying in the country. People doesn't have access to cash because many of former government officials were accused of looting the reserves of cash reserves in the central bank, and the assets belong to Afghanistan and the US have been frozen. So the lack of cash has caused many problems, including increasing of prices. Now, in Afghanistan, we used to have very big families, and more than 70% of people are struggling to access to food and other things they need. So it will be very difficult to be optimistic about the situation in Afghanistan without world paying attention to them, as the country experience a very high rate of poverty and joblessness during these days, and as well as the fightings and the security problems are kind of decreased now, but still there are target killings. The former employees of government have been targeted, security forces, and human rights activists. So, and many people are still in Afghanistan who couldn't make it outside the country. They're still in danger. So situation is very much fragile in Afghanistan.
Thank you. Before we bring in Matt Wald, just to get Donatello's thoughts.
I think also one of the big issues is ISIS, and how ISIS has been increasing its presence in eastern Afghanistan. And ISIS is fighting the Taliban. I mean, the explosions and the mass killings have come recently from the ISIS side. So what happens to that, I think, is very important. As a country falls into greater poverty, it means this translates into greater migration. It translates into exploitation of young children and women. And you see it a lot in countries where the poverty rates increase. So we got to look at it that way. On the one hand, there is this generation, as Fahim said, of young people that have grown up under a new world that their parents never knew. But can it fight through incredible poverty, the massive climate change as well? 2 years ago, there was a horrific drought with massive numbers of deaths as a result of that, and dislocations. So Afghanistan and its people are going to be fighting uphill. It's an uphill battle, and they need the help of the rest of the world, because it's not that the rest of the world is getting there just, oh, here, have a little bit over there. It's for its neighbors. Its neighbors need to maintain a stable neighborhood. So what is the next step? And my biggest question is, what's going to happen when ISIS decides to take over more?
And that's an interesting question, because for a lot of us, we think that they have already gone so far, and you're saying there's still room for them to get more involved, and that's definitely worrying.
Oh yes, they're doing this right now, saying it's our time to move in.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about what is being done to help our friends who are now here, the Afghan refugees who used to work at the New York Times. And we have a guest joining us now. Matt Wald is here. Matt, hello, welcome.
Sree, hi. Thanks for doing this program. I'm here to say, when you reach Houston, when you get out of the chaos of Kabul, it's not like everybody lives happily ever after. These folks have lots of needs. And one of the ones I was surprised by, the Times and others have taken on big chunks of this, but not everything. One of the things I was surprised by is driver's licenses. Imagine living in Texas trying to get a job without a driver's license. If you come to this country from a foreign country, you can trade in your license to get a U.S. license, but you got to have paperwork from back home. And guess what the Taliban does not have? A Department of Motor Vehicles. So Fahim and colleagues are starting from scratch. And one of the things we're arranging is for them to be enrolled in the class, then get the certificate, get the learner's permit, do a few hours behind the wheel with a professional driving school, and then have a car to go take the driver's exam in. That's a little section we could carve out and get done. We're also helping. They're already in language classes, but we have some people from the Times, mostly retirees, who have some experience in teaching English, and we're going to do some supplemental English classes online, especially for the women who are less likely to speak English than the men are, and who probably essentially need to get out into life. They need to go to supermarkets. They need to function in American society. And they need help learning English. So we have had a lot of generous people. We could use some more generous people. They have lots of needs. And as I said, we're just chipping away at the edges of some things we think we can handle.
Thank you. And we're showing on screen the GoFundMe that you've set up, and the address is on the screen. If they can search, I guess, Afghan colleagues resettling in Houston, they'll find it there as well. And it's being organized by Matthew Wald, so you can find it that way. Or I don't know if you're listed as Matt or Matthew there.
I guess I'm listed as Matthew, yes.
Okay, great. And otherwise, you can see that number 8183822A. And we'll also make sure we tweet that out, and we'd love people to support it. My first thought, Matt, was that this is obviously important that you're raising this, but it's not that big a number. It's $12,000. I'm glad you've raised 10,000 of it already, and we'll help you close that, I'm sure. But why this number? Why not try to raise a lot more? Is that goal to kind of push that some more? Or were you trying to start a little kind of on the safer side?
Fahim will have more detail, but there are 12 in his group that know enough English to pass the written driver's test. There are others who they already know how to drive. There are others who are learning English. I believe part of the group is still in Mexico City and hasn't even made it to Houston yet. So there'll be more needs later. It's an expensive process, as anybody who has a teenager might know. And these folks have a head start because essentially they're adults and they know how to drive, but the rules of the road are a little different in the United States, and you have to pass a test like how far do you park from a fire hydrant, or stay behind an emergency vehicle, or other things that you got to learn, take the test, do some time behind the wheel with a professional driver. We will establish other needs along the way, and we will help with those also to the extent that we're able.
Thank you. And I see names of some colleagues, people we know, friends in common. And so Max Frankel gave a generous donation.
Max arrived in the United States as a refugee in 1940, I believe, from the Nazis.
And went on to be managing editor of the New York Times. So
yes,
yeah, so he has a direct connection to the refugees. So I can see that. I saw my friend Pradnya Joshi has given money, another former New York Times editor. Other names as well. As, I saw Claudia Dreyfus there, Jeannie Pinder. It's great to see so many people donating, and we'd love more people to donate and support this great cause. Fahim, what is your response to this kind of support that you're getting?
I'm and everyone in my group are very much grateful from the support we have received in Houston, and from our current and former colleagues in the New York Times, and from everyone. It was beyond our expectations, and sometimes it would be difficult for me to keep on the request for help. There would be a lot of people, and I would be not able to provide them a list or like the details they needed for helping. That means a lot. Like in Houston, we didn't we felt very special. Like there were Afghans who have came to Houston 3 decades or 4 decades ago that were coming every day to the hotel when we arrived at the first point, and they were bringing food from their houses. They were bringing whatever they could, and all our colleagues and the New York Times and Catholic Charity was helping us with our paperwork and resettlement. Everyone was so amazing, and we are so much thankful to them.
Great. Stefan says, we'll be sure to tweet and share the GoFundMe info on all social platforms.
Thank you.
That's great. My
Sree-
father is watching in Kerala, India, retired Indian ambassador TP Srinivasan. And he says, very relevant and important discussion. And thank you, Acha, for watching with us here. Ravina Khosla is in the Washington area and says, thank you for sharing your experience. How can we help families in our local areas in Maryland heal from the trauma? So do any of you have some thoughts on that? And I know that Donatella is in that region, and if you can also extrapolate for people who may be in other places as well.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say is you don't, once you become a refugee, you never take that coat off. It's one of your many identities because of everything you've lost so much and you've had to recreate. You will spend a lot of time recreating your life. It is your young children that will go out into this life and become American faster. And I would like, before going answering that question, I would like to ask Fahim a question, I think, to tell the story of his diaries, because it's an example of how much one can lose. And what he had to do since he could write, Fahim wrote diaries, and he had hundreds of diaries in his house in Kabul. And I will leave it to Fahim to tell the story of what he did with his diaries.
So before diaries, I want to start with something else. When we went to the airport, I had 5 luggages. And when I asked my wife to pick everything, and I have bought only 5 luggages, and she said, like, there are a lot of things, because I'm married for 10 years, and we were buying everything together, and so. And then when we left the airport, we were asked to pack everything in backpacks, like only 1 or 2 backpacks, not more than that. So at the first point, I sent my diaries to my mother-in-law. That was the only thing that worth it so much to me. I just locked the door of my apartment, and the only thing I collect was my diaries. I didn't touch anything else. So when I came back from the airport and we were not able to make it, so my mother-in-law was very much worried about my diaries, and she said, like, if the Taliban read it and find out that you are my son-in-law, that she had got 2 young sons, and she was worried that they may kill my sons because of your diaries, and I don't want to do this. So I find a barrel. I bought some diesel, and then I start like reading as much as I could, and then I would tear every page and throw it to the barrel, and then like I lit a fire, and I burned them all. And it took me like the whole night until the morning that I would just tear one paper and burn it. Like that was the toughest part of this whole thing, and it is still like because I always felt very rich. I thought like I have everything in repair, and I saw my father during the civil war that he was burning the documents and everything, and I thought it's okay, like it's normal. But when I burned my diaries, it was very painful. It was a very bad experience. That like for what was my memories, I couldn't keep them, and there was the risk that people maybe punished because of my memories. That there was nothing else. That this was what the Taliban have done to the country. That they were, if almost in some point, almost every day they would carry out a suicide attack or a roadside bomb attack in a corner of the country, and they would kill innocent people. And I would report on those things, and then I would write my memories. But at that point, that was a threat for anyone, so I had to demolish them, and unfortunately I don't have them anymore.
Wow, what a story. My goodness. I'm so moved by what you had to go through, and then sharing that with us now must be so difficult. Adding to, of course, the pain of everything else that has gone on all around you. And so I'm so sorry that you went through that. I want to have to ask Matt a question. We only have a few minutes left. Matt, why did you take this on as a former New York Times staffer? You moved on to other kinds of work, but tell me why you took this on.
I was at the Times for 38 years, but you watch this international screw up live on television for hour after hour, and you say to yourself, what little corner of this can I make a difference in? How can we organize just a little bit of help locally? All action starts locally, and with modern technology, actually, it's easier than it used to be. Fahim said that Afghan people already in Houston brought food to the hotels where they were staying when they first arrived. I can't do that from here, and they wouldn't like my cooking anyway. But there are some things we can do.
Oh, and I think that there's so much that we can all learn from everything that they've gone through, and the fact that this community now exists. Many of you are living in the same building, as Fahim told us. That's important. Jan says, sounds like a publisher should contact you to write and publish a book about your experiences. And Jan says, hats off for your bravery and your writing. So thank you, Jan. My mom is also watching in Kerala, India. So thank you, Mom, Ma, for being with us. Jan says, in Iowa, after Vietnam, then Governor Ray encouraged churches to sponsor immigrant families. Many in small towns, the church families embraced the refugees. Though the once refugee families are an important part of our towns in Iowa and have enriched our communities. I wonder if Afghan refugees are being placed in smaller communities. We've talked, of course, about big cities in Texas. Do any of you have any thoughts on that? Maybe Donatella does. That comparison to how refugees were embraced in previous eras compared to now, and then we can have others respond as well.
In general, the way in previous eras, the way refugees were placed was that they had to be placed in areas where there was the possibility of finding jobs. And they were coming in probably as not speaking English and without skills. And so generally they went into small towns or small cities where there was, big car plants or in the chicken industry, all those things where they could start out. If you go into these towns, it's almost like a history, layers of refugees. Oh yes, it was the former Yugoslavia, and then after the Yugoslavia, first it was the Vietnamese, and then it was the next one, and then it was the next one, and it's almost like a handover for the next generation of refugees that comes in, and then they move up. It is the basically, when they come in, when the refugees first come, they are working for their children to grow up as Americans and to move up in terms of being able to go to university and beyond that. And the first generation that comes here works really hard, really, really hard at backbreaking labor.
Can I add briefly? One of the effects of the last 4 years is that the mechanism in the United States for accepting refugees and helping them integrate has atrophied because the previous administration so reduced the number of incoming refugees. And as a result, the bureaucracy to do this kind of work isn't there anymore on the government side, and even in places like Catholic Charities, they've partly withered away. One of the reasons these folks are in Houston is Texas had the ability to absorb a large number quickly. We've got a statue in the harbor in New York. She's called the Mother of Exiles, the Statue of Liberty. But frankly, finding an apartment in Brooklyn, which has absorbed entire nations of refugees, isn't as easy as finding a place to live in Houston. There are jobs there. I fear that they'll grow up with Texas drawls, but there are jobs there. There's an economy there. Price of living is lower. And anywhere in the United States, as with the Vietnamese in Indiana, anywhere in the United States, you can get started.
No, that's such an important point. Folks, we have just a couple more minutes left. I want to make sure we get any more questions that come in. I know that one thing that people aren't clear about is what are the long-term prospects for Fahim and his family and friends who are together. We can get them a job, you can get a car, driver's license, but there's still so much that they have left behind. So Fahim, if you can share your thoughts on that. What have you been told is the long-term opportunities for you?
So, our team is preparing to have something and start from somewhere. So, like those who can speak English, they were very fast and they start going to an English center where they've been taught and they're trying to learn on daily basis. And then what the remaining of us, like those who can speak English, they're waiting for their work permit and other documents that they can get a driving license and then start somewhere. Like when I was asked by people in Houston, like, what do you think? What job do you want to have? I said, like, I don't have the luxury to pick. I will start from somewhere, and I don't care. Like it could be from Walmart or from anywhere, but I will need to start from somewhere because that's what I should do. I have a family and I need to feed them. And in the first time when we arrived to our apartments, we had only basic stuff in our apartments, and when people would contact me and ask me like, what do you need, we would say we are good, we don't need anything. There was one woman from a Muslim organization, and she said, can I come to your house? I said, yes, why not? When she came, she said, you don't have anything. Why you say that you have everything? And everyone in the group. I said, well, like in our culture, it's not good to ask for things, and like we will sort them out as soon as we start working. So like our group, we had very good jobs back home, and we had built a good life. So it was not and is not easy to ask for help. And in my culture, like always the hand who gives is above the hand who takes. So that's why like it was a big struggle for us to accept help or support from anyone. It's difficult, but we will sort it out.
Thank you. I just want to read this comment on screen from Tamima Goldberg Schulman, a reporter burning his notebooks and memories. This is like burning sacred texts. Among the many losses you've endured and shared, I'm especially so sorry about this one. Thank you so much for sharing that comment. And my dad, who is following the political sides of all of this, says, strangely, Afghanistan did not figure in the Biden-Xi summit. At least there was no public statement. Donatella, any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I don't know that they hadn't done that, but I'm not surprised. I think that Biden doesn't really want to focus on Afghanistan that much. I mean, it's sort of a sidebar. He hasn't really taken a main vocal stand on the state of the Afghans. This is a tough one. I don't think that. I think China has already moved in and wants to continue moving into that area, and they don't care politically whether it's Taliban or not Taliban. The Chinese, I mean, as long as they can continue their road initiative across the Himalaya, So I think that the Chinese will, the same way they're encroaching in Nepal and Bhutan, they were already in Afghanistan, and more will come.
Yeah, and that's of course makes it even more difficult to
and more complicated.
Yeah, if it makes it more complicated. I know we would want to keep going, but there's so much that we haven't been able to cover. I'm going to do a couple of announcements, and then want to come back to each of you to give us one final thought. And of course, we want everyone to please make a donation to this particular GoFundMe. Turns out, Matt, that there are many things around journalists and refugees and Afghans. If you're searching inside GoFundMe, as you know, so we want to make sure people get to this one so they can help specifically Fahim and his friends. All the refugees need help. There's so much to be done, but we would love for people to go to this particular fundraiser and share it. And you should know that some of our friends have been retweeting this show, including Bobby Ghosh, who was a longtime foreign editor and more at various publications. Ben Smith just retweeted this show, and you know that Ben wrote the story about how the New York Times brought journalists to Mexico, and that was a fun column, not fun, but important column that he wrote, and timely, and very important for us to understand what was happening there. So folks, please hit share right now. If you can make a donation, no amount is too small, that's great. If you can't, or even if you can't, please hit share, retweet. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn, and it'll start as soon as we're off the air. It'll run again on all of those, and we'd love Fahim and Donatella when they have a chance to share that video again. And so we're going to come right back to everybody. We just want to make a couple of quick announcements on our next New York Times read along, which is coming up this Sunday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. We'll be talking about the 1619 project that's coming out as a book. So there's a lot to talk about. Neil Parekh will be guest hosting, and we have Carsonia Wise Whitehead and Walter Greason. Both of them will be talking about where we are with social justice and so much more. At 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time every Sunday, we read the New York Times out loud. Just so everyone knows, this is not just about the New York Times. It's about supporting good journalism, good information, accurate news, and we want you to support any local journalism in your towns by getting a newspaper. So with that, I'm going to ask each of our guests to give us a final thought, and of course, we'll keep plugging that GoFundMe. We'll tweet it, share it, etc. So over to you, Matt. We'll start with you.
Sree, thank you. Thank you for your personal donation, which just showed up here.
I just wanted to say, if I can, so I did that while hosting the show.
Good.
So
You can multitask in a good way, right?
So how easy it is, right? How easy
right.
It took me just about 90 seconds to do it, maybe less. So everyone, please make a donation. No amount is too small.
You're correct that no amount is too small. I was going to add that no amount is too big. The United States has fumbled. The Mexicans picked up after us. We fumbled, but we can do our best now to recover. And campaigns like this are an attempt to recover. And thank you to everyone who has given and everyone who will give.
Thank you so much, Matt. And everyone, follow Matt at Matt L. Wald on Twitter. And Matt wouldn't remember this, but we met a century ago when he spoke at Columbia Journalism School. I was a student then, and he came and spoke to my class. And I still remember how nice that was that he did that. So here you are again. Let's go to Donatella Lorch, who's in the DC area.
We've talked a lot about what we can do for refugees, and I'd like to talk about what refugees can do for us, because it is a two-way street, and they have so enriched my life. Meeting refugees, learning their life, becoming friends across, I would say, 6 different nations of refugees that I have written about, that I have become friends with, that I have gone to their marriages. I have gone to see their newborn babies. They are all they have expanded my world incredibly. And that is what I want people to think of as they're reaching out to help them, because it's a two-way street.
I love that. Thank you very much. Let's go to Fahim. Give him the final word.
I thanks everyone who welcomed us in Houston, and thank you New York Times for the great support, and Catholic Charities, and all my colleagues who tried their best to help us and make things easier for us. And I want to remind us that the situation in Afghanistan is very bad, and Afghanistan was previously also ignored, and we all saw the consequences. So, like, not only the people there, but the rest of the world will also suffer if we keep turning a blind eye toward the country.
Well, very well put, and I know that America is not good at following up, or especially after what Matt said, after we fumbled. But we hope that there is something that can still be done. Folks, please help these journalists and their families and their friends. More than 100 of these folks have been brought to America by the New York Times,
And more to come.
and more to come. And so please support them. And Matt is in charge of this particular GoFundMe. You have Fahim's Twitter handle as well, and Donatella's. I'm so grateful to all of you for spending time with us. I said it'd be about 40 minutes. Here we are going on an hour, and we could keep going. There's still comments coming in, and that tells you how important this is. Jonathan says, an important and fascinating program. Thank you. And Tamima says, can you paste a GoFundMe in the comments, please? So we'll do that in each of the platforms, especially in LinkedIn, where Tamima is. So you will make sure that she has a chance to donate. And thank you very much, everybody. And we'll see you again. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.